Be ready for BYU Game Day. Download the KSL News Radio app to stream BYU games, plus breaking news during the week. That's the app for KSL News Radio.
Welcome back in. It's Cougar Nation. Season 2. We love doing this show because the calls we get, the interaction we get from you, Cougar Nation, it is so much fun. We welcome the calls. We love all the takes. We don't always agree with them, but we love to get the pulse of Cougar Nation. That's what the show is all about. Let's get back out to the phone line. Let's go down to Springville in Utah County. Stu, what do you think of that win against Baylor?
Man, I was so excited about that first quarter. 21 points that fast, super cool, right?
Yep.
And then second quarter, 10 points? What's going on?
And then
in the second half, 3 points and then 0 points. So we've been talking a lot about, you guys have been talking a lot about Jake Retzlaff and his play, and that's true. This is part of the problem, but there's a guy calling those plays. And I don't know what's going on with A-Rod. Why? Because it felt like we took the pedal off our foot off the pedal and slowed down and made conservative choices, like running the ball up the middle when Baylor stacked the box with 9 of the 11 guys. It doesn't seem like I know it's a time-burning play, but if we're trying to get a first down to win the game, and I don't know what the calls are. I don't pretend to know. I'm not a quarterback. But when you look at those 4 quarters going from 21 points to 10 points to 3 points to 0 points, something happened. And how do we keep up a game where we can score? I actually have a son that said, Dad, if we keep this up, we're going to have 84 points by the end of the game. And I said, wouldn't that be great? But that's not going to happen. And so my comment is Jake's doing a pretty good job. I think he will do better. And I want to see play calls coming from the box that are a little more pedal to the metal, so to speak, trying to make sure that we have a comfortable lead so we don't have to depend on Crew Wakely to intercept it at the end of the game to win.
Thanks for the call, Stu. Appreciate that. It was interesting. Kalani, unprovoked, addressed this today on during his weekly press conference, and he said that he didn't feel like it was conservative play calling. And honestly, Stu, I didn't come away from that game feeling like BYU took their foot off the gas. Like, yes, there's always going to be some head scratching third and shorts. It feels like under A-Rod that have been like, what was that call? Or third and longs and it's a halfback draw. What was that? But I didn't come away overly critical of the play calling as I have in other games. I kind of just felt like BYU didn't execute, and Baylor's defensive ends really made caused a lot of havoc on BYU's retooled offensive line. BYU still did not give up a sack to a Baylor team that had 8 sacks the previous week against Colorado. I kind of felt like par for the course for what BYU's play calling has been with A-Rod, so it didn't feel completely shocking to me. And at that point, with how much injuries were happening, just get out of Waco and get out with a win.
Yeah, in the moment, I felt like Stu. I'm like, what are we doing? Why is this happening? And then I stepped away, and I remembered some sequences in that game that I think A-Rod was still being aggressive. There was the trick play to Ta'ase where he was clearly interfered with. If that's not called, that's an aggressive call. A double, like a trick play.
And the fake punt,
pass.
too.
The fake punt was aggressive. And then we're also not remembering intermediate throws. Darius Lassiter drops a ball. That gets you on Baylor's side of the field in the second half. And running up the middle, too, a lot of times I feel like Stu, where I'm like, the play calling's not good enough. But in that particular game, when Jake threw that interception, I was begging for them to run the football.
And with play calling, too, I will say, look, we've been on this show. We'll call out play calls from Roderick, but I did like some things that, understanding you didn't have LJ, you didn't have Sione Aimoa, Hinckley still not at full strength, suited up, but really not his full best. And after they got the 21-0 lead, they probably felt like, we don't need Rapali, let's get out of Waco without him. But they went to a lot more empty sets, it felt like. I know Jake kind of downplayed that, like, oh, yeah, we do that all the time, but they went 5 wide. Like
and I loved it.
What we've talked about. And you saw Darius Lassiter get 13 targets in a situation where it's either Nawahine, and I like what Nawahine did, 19 carries, 51 yards.
Yep.
But I kind of like more Darius Lassiter or Chase Roberts, who had kind of a lighter game, 6 targets for him. But I like that they had a lot more empty sets, and they turned to those wide receivers more than what we've seen sometimes in the past.
Driving into the show, I was thinking about that second half because all weekend long I've been fighting with two differing opinions. One, great win, doesn't matter how they come, great win. And on the other hand, though, you're up 28-7 to have to seal with an INT. Like, that's not ideal, even at the Power 5 level. Like, great teams, I don't think, find themselves in those situations that often. Up 21, although we did see with Alabama and Georgia.
Did you say Bama blew a 28-zip lead?
Right.
I mean, I know it's Georgia, but still, they blew a 4-touchdown lead. It happens.
Totally. However, I just keep coming back to, if you don't get that, Baylor doesn't get that flop call on Caleb Etienne that was clearly not you get into victory formation. And then are we even having this discussion? Because it's a much more comfortable win. Or if you get that PA call on Taase and you punch it in, you win by double digits. We're not having this discussion. So it was a little disappointing not to win by a larger margin considering you're up 21, because I certainly feel that. However, there was a lot of things that went against you that were out of your control that I do not think were play calls.
I'm with you there. Let's get back out of the phone line. Mike from Texas, Big 12, heart of Big 12 country. Mike, you want to talk about the Baylor game?
Yeah, guys, it's Michael. Called in a few times. I actually wanted to follow up on a call I had last year with you guys. I mentioned last year that I thought we had talent, but I didn't think we had dogs. And I remember, Mitch, you asked me, well, what gives you hope for this team? And I said that when players buy in, they improve. And I mentioned 3 players by name. I mentioned Blake Mangelson, I mentioned Darius Lassiter, and I mentioned Crew Wakely. And I felt like this weekend was an epitome, a demonstration of that buy-in and the work they put in since last year, and a team really bought in. And I think you got to give the players credit. I also think you got to give Kalani credit for retaining those players, for not recruiting over them, for knowing what he had. And I think that buy-in is the reason you're seeing like 4th and 5th stringers able to contribute, because we actually have leaders on this team. We actually have players that have bought in. They are, sacrificing for the team, and you're seeing the fruits of that. I know a lot of times we want to put on coaching, and a lot, it's the players' program. So wanted to comment on that. And then the second thing is just like, I know that there's this narrative, and I'm not ready to give flowers to Aaron Rodgers, but maybe a little bouquet. Like, there's this narrative that Jay Hill and the defense is saving the offense. I mean, we scored 34 points on Saturday, guys, on the road to a team that's not awful. And they scored 34 points. A-Rod, with this quarterback room since 2018, you got Zach Wilson, number 2 pick, Jaron Hall in the NFL, Baylor Romney won games, Sol-Jay Maiava couldn't throw a pass and won a bowl game. And then you have Jake Retzlaff, who went from maybe the worst D1 quarterback I've ever seen to at least top half of the Big 12 right now, maybe top 5. I think that we've got to he leaves stuff to be desired on the recruiting trail, but at the end of the day, if this is the result, I'm not ready to give full flowers, but you got to give a little bouquet. So that's all I want to say, guys. If we beat Arizona, I live in DFW, I'm going to get a babysitter for December 7th. So we'll see.
Love the call, Michael. And I love his point, too, about Kalani recruiting these guys back and running back this same group last year. Because if you compare last year to this year, Mitch, the big differentiating factor is last year there was wholesale changes. There were roster turnovers to the likes of which we've never seen. It was like half the team was new. And this year, you invested in a lot of those guys, and it's paying off. You know what? It's a lot of fun as a fan, too, to invest into players, Darius Lassiter being one of them, where he's here for another year. You want to see how he improves. You want to be a fan of that. And that's what's so exciting about this team. And I don't want to look too far ahead, Mitch, but there's a lot of dudes who can come back next year, too. So if he can retain this group and build upon this, some guys are going to be hard to retain. Like Jack Kelly, I don't know how you retain that. Even though he's got eligibility, that's going to be hard to retain because the NFL it's coming calling for Jack Kelly. But there's a lot of guys that can come back, Jake included, in that group. So it's a good point how chemistry and continuity, it still matters in college football, Mitch.
Cougar Nation sponsored by Central Bank. Central Bank voted best bank and mortgage in Utah Valley. Visit Central Bank online at cbutah.com. We're taking a break. We'll get to more of your text and also phone calls. 801-575-8255. You can weigh in on our question of the day about Jake Retzlaff, how he's performed to this point of the season, or anything else you want to riff on here on BYU football in the 2024 season. As the Cougs are 5-0, we're breaking it down more next here on Cougar Nation.